I'll just keep it going.
Okay, this is George Lees and John Patterson, and we're talking about jokes at the war dead's expense. I'm going to play you a couple of videos featuring Rowan Atkinson and a character called Mr. Bean, and I'll explain why at the end of the video clips. Okay, the first one is the famous Blackadder, the last episode in the World War I profile, the jokes about World War I, the jokes about Butcher Haig, and the jokes about...
How are you feeling, Sally?
Not all that good, Blackadder. Rather hoped I'd get through the whole show. Go back to work at Pratt & Sons. Keep wicket for the Croydon gentleman. Married Doris. Made a note in my diary on the way here. Simply says, bugger. Right. Let's move.
Six, mayonnaise.
Can you hear it, John?
Look at your stick, Lieutenant.
Rather, sir. Wouldn't want to face a machine gun without this.
So, you know, the guys would not want to face a machine gun with a stick to defend themselves.
Listen, our guns have stopped.
Our guns have stopped.
Maybe the war's over. Maybe it's peace.
Maybe it's peace.
The big knobs have got round the table and yanked the iron out of the fire.
Thank God. We lived through it. The Great War, 1914 to 1917.
Hip, hip. Hooray!
We lived through the Great War, 1914 to 1917.
We're about to attack. Not even our generals are mad enough to shell their own men. They think it's far more sporting to let the Germans do it.
So we are, in fact, going over. This is, as they say, it.
I'm afraid so. Unless I can think of something very quickly.
Company, one, place, forward.
Oh, there's a nasty splinter on that ladder, sir. A bloke could hurt himself on that.
Stand.
Yeah, he's just said that there's a nasty splinter on that ladder. A bloke could hurt himself as they go to their
He's
deaths.
just been appointed Professor of Cunning at Oxford University.
Yes, sir.
On the signal, company will advance.
Well, I'm afraid it'll have to wait. Whatever it was, I'm sure it was better than my plan to get out of this by pretending to be mad. I mean, who would have noticed another madman around here? Good luck, everyone.
Okay, so that's the... Can you hear me on the microphone?
Yes, yes.
I cannot understand why you cannot hear me. You cannot hear the soundtrack?
I can hear it, but it's very, very quiet.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop the Blackadder video now and take you to the actor Rowan Atkinson talking to a Swiss interviewer or a German interviewer, and he's talking about why he's happy to say goodbye to Mr. Bean. The reason he's dropping Mr. Bean as a joke is because we've explained the joke to the world. Mr. Bean was the war correspondent for Galipolli, and that was revealed to me by Quentin Bryce, the Governor General in Australia, who recently resigned. She earns £360,000, dollars I mean, a year to be a diplomat. She's more powerful than Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister in Australia, because she works for the Crown, like the whole of the Commonwealth still does. And what she's sharing the joke with, Mr. Bean, in the former Rowan Atkinson, opened the London Olympics. He made a cynical joke playing the Chariots of Fire, which is part of the religious fraud that you and I understand now entirely. And it was all jocular. They had James Bond came down in a parachute, the Queen came down in a parachute, and Rowan Atkinson played the Chariots of Fire with a massive grin on his face, as if the whole world might not understand that Mr. Bean was the war correspondent for Gallipoli. That exposure led to Quentin Bryce's resignation within 6 weeks, and they've just replaced her with a new Governor General who was part of the brutalisation by NATO of East Timor. You remember the East Timor campaign, John?
Yeah.
The new boss was a general who led the campaign there. That's the Governor General who's replaced Quentin Bryce. Let's listen to the interview that Rowan Atkinson, and we'll take it as far as the cars that he drives, the elite cars that he drives, because my next exposures involve the directors and manufacturers of those elite cars who also make weapons.
Neutral country in the middle of Europe, you know, you don't have as clear an identity as a French person or a German person, and therefore, you know, if you're going to die at the hands of somebody, you'd quite like them to be well defined, quite sort of famous for being something. You know, poking fun at races, I suppose, is more difficult than it used to be, but no less enjoyable than it used to be. That's the trouble. But you've got to be careful. That's all. You know, you've got to try not to offend too much.
Du musst hart trainieren.
So this is Mr. Bean now doing the jiu-jitsu number, having a laugh
That's
at...
actually a question as a reader gave us. Do you actually watch your own movies?
No, I don't. I don't watch them once they're finished. I mean, I watch them a lot when they're in production because I tend to be a part of the editing process, so I'm sitting there throughout the post-production process, so I see myself endlessly for months and months on end, and I'm quite happy to see myself. I get used to divorcing myself, actually, from my presence on screen. I just see a character. I don't see myself.
Yeah, it's okay, it's on screen, it's on the soundtrack, and it's in my microphone.
Keine Sorge. Sie können sich auf mich verlassen.
I'm not good at improvisation. I'm very scared of improvisation. I try to do as little improvisation on the set as possible. I like it all worked out beforehand, and we work it out in the script meetings with the writer and the director. So we say, you know, it's going to be like this, and that's going to happen. But our director, Oliver Parker, thinks that actually I'm better.
Yeah, it's okay, John, just bear with me. So he's now on the golf course taking the piss, talking in German, just making a fool of himself like he always does. Johnnny English has now been introduced. He's on the directorships that I mentioned later.
Exactly. Well, I just felt the Aston Martin thing had been a bit overdone. I feel as though I've seen, you know, because James Bond always used Aston Martin, which is good. It's a great car. Nothing against Aston Martin.
You own a couple?
I've owned at least 5 in my life. I don't own any at the moment, as it happens, but I've owned plenty of them. But I fancied something different, and because I'd really grown to love the Rolls Royce Phantom, and I thought, well, maybe a 2-door Phantom might be more fun. And then I knew of this ridiculous engine that they developed, that Rolls-Royce developed for the Phantom but never actually put in it, this 9-litre V16 engine, a 16-cylinder engine, which they developed, and then they thought it was a bit over the top, even for Rolls-Royce. And I said to Rolls-Royce, would you mind getting it out and putting it in our Johnnny English?
Is that the way things happen? Johnnny English calls up Rolls-Royce and says, would you mind?
Okay, so he's just declared that he's gotten a bit bored with owning, what was the Bond car that you said?
Aston Martin.
Yeah, he's had five Aston Martins in his lifetime as a very, very highly paid celebrity at the BBC Trust who pays no tax at all. That's why they're a trust. Yeah. Okay, so he's owned 5 Aston Martins and he's declared that he's bored with that, and he's moved into the Rolls Royce sector, and Johnnny English, who he plays cynically as a spy, you know, just making a fool of the intel system that we now understand is entirely a money laundering sector to steal from the British Treasury. Okay, so this is one of the Oxford Union people, you know, like the Python's jokers, that are tax evaders. They are involved in the jokes about the war dead that we've just heard, and you'll hear it tomorrow when you listen to my video script, unless they've screwed my camera, but I don't believe they can do that. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce you to the director of Rolls Royce. Yeah, You'll realise the magnitude of the Johnnny English joke in a few minutes' time. Okay? One of the directors that I want to now direct the world's attention to at Rolls-Royce is Dame Helen Alexander. She has 3 directorships, and one of them is relatively innocent. It's at a girls' school, St Paul's Girls' School in London. They've got relatively small amounts at the bank, but you should see how much Helen Alexander has got at the bank. When you look at the total amount, it's at any given time, it's over 13 billion is in her portfolio of business. Now this is a university leader that is now taking a fee of £9,000 a year to get the education that she got for free. I want to explain to you her directorships and her links to Rupert Murdoch, to Rebekah Brooks, to Sir somebody English. I forget his first name, but what you're hearing from the man that makes the jokes at the war dead's expense, Rowan Atkinson, is a cover-up for the fact that she is a director at Rolls-Royce, and she is also a director in overlapping companies with Sir somebody English. I'll read it out from the list of these frauds. They're not frauds, they're legitimate non-executive directorships, but nobody but you and I at this stage know that she has 30 or 40, and that she's a billionaire when the students are cast into a life in debt. They can never have a mortgage. When they come out with their honours degree, they're £50,000 in debt. You cannot have a mortgage if your life is lived in a debt pool. Okay, so I'm now going to go into my files and tell you about her directorships. So she's got the one with the St Paul's Girls' School, relatively innocent. She's got the one that I've labelled as the Rolls-Royce listing, and I'm going to go there first. Okay, and I'm just going to read off the companies that she's a director for. Rolls-Royce Group plc, British Telecommunications Public Limited, that's BT, one of the many subsidiaries of BT. ILW Company Limited, Terrace Production Limited, EIU Orc Ventures Limited, The Economist Editorial Overseas Company Limited, The Economist Books Limited, Dartford Printing Limited, Ryder Street Properties Limited, Economist Publications Limited, so that's a shelf, that's a Ponzi, The Economist Group Limited, The Economist Overseas Holdings Limited. Yeah, there's one magazine, there's dozens and dozens of profiteering boards. Ryder Street Properties Management Limited, 30 Club of London Limited, in brackets, The Economist Intelligence Unit Limited, which may be the reason why we got shut down in the earlier video. Eurofinance Conference is Limited, St Paul's Girls' School, wait for the next one, it impacts on every household in Britain, Centrica plc. Also on the board, John Major, 20% price hikes year on year, 5 years back to back. Yeah, this is a university vice chancellor.
Fantastic.
Tate Enterprises Limited, that's the art sector. Audit, you know, the Tate Museum and the Lobster Telephone and all those things. Audit Bureau of Circulations Limited, Professional Publishers Association, that will become very relevant later on in the video.
Busy woman.
Yeah, but the publishing emphasis, we're going to the Murdoch Group,
Yep.
Eshore Group plc, St Paul's Girls' School again. Why would they need another register? Maybe that's why they don't have very much money at the bank. Writers and Scholars International Limited. Oh, and another subsidiary of BT, BT Group plc, Rolls-Royce plc, yeah, Northern Foods Limited, The Economist Group Trustee Company Limited, Economist Newspaper Limited, The Tate Foundation PA Group Limited.
And she gets a salary from each of these.
Yeah, our salary at Southampton, you'll be able to find that on Wikipedia. It's somewhere between 250,000 for our day job, and 400,000, which is what the Oxford guy gets. And you know who the Oxford guy is by now?
Bullying them, boy.
It's Lord Patten, the former Hong Kong Governor General,
Yeah.
the head of the BBC Trust. That is the man who pays Rowan Atkinson's wages. None of the trust pay any tax. That's why it's a trust. Okay. Right, now I'm going to open up the Murdoch link where she's listed on the board with Rupert Murdoch. But it's not simply Rupert Murdoch, it's a much more complex name that I've never heard of, which is really difficult to find. And when I found that she was with him on the board, it wowed me. So let me just skim down the board members. So she's right at the top. She was involved in that, appointed in 2014. The company's called the PA Group Limited, and I don't know what that actually is, but it's highly likely that it's something to do with publishing. So Dame Helen Alexander was appointed on the 6th of June 2014. So this is like breaking news. The links between one of the profiteering vice chancellors in what they call the Russell Group. That's the top 20 or so universities in the UK. All of them are tied into Harvard and Georgetown and the elite universities all around the world. And I left the best university in New Zealand in 2009, and it is not anywhere near this league of big time players who are actually mafias. Let me read down the list that she's on with his nibs. Okay, and you start seeing previous directors and secretaries. I had highlighted this earlier. Oh, here we are. So James Rupert Murdoch was on this list up to 2010. Can you think of a reason why he might drop out in 2010 when the new government was elected and in the lead up to the Leveson inquiry? Can you think of the reasons that Rebekah Brooks has been in the news? Up to 2010 she was working for Rupert Murdoch, Mr. James Rupert Murdoch. He's got 65 companies on this list, and that is the resigned companies. So he crashes 65 of a total of the 76 companies that he's owned. And you've heard from Gordon and me what the implications of that is. That suddenly the money's out of the UK business directory, yep, and those corporate shelves, and somewhere into Panama or the Caymans or any of the land-bound tax havens in America like Delaware or Florida or Monterey in Mexico. Yeah, it could be anywhere now. Yeah, but that's the famous Murdoch. And when you scan further down the listing, you find, and this sort of surprised me a bit, because I don't believe that this will be the celebrity, but there's a Mr. Paul Potts on the list. Can you remember how Paul Potts came to fame?
This is the
yeah, the man who sang Nessun Dorma on the celebrity programme at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening. I forget what you call it.
Oh, I don't have a TV, George.
Well, the man who led that is now one of the leading celebrities, and he does most of his telecasting now in America. But he sat in judgment on people that were aspiring to become celebrities, and Paul Potts sang Nessun Dorma on that and absolutely wowed them. Now, I don't believe that this will be the Paul Potts that is the director of 13 companies, all of which have been crashed. But all of the lists of names, and there are dozens of names on this list, almost all of them have got over 15 to 20 or 30 or 40. A lot of them have got 50 to 60 companies, and a lot of those companies have been crashed, because we're talking about the period that spans 2008.
Yep. And
Murdoch bailed out so that he could plead blameless when he was interviewed on the Leveson review. And I've explained the Leveson governance and the links of Leveson to the Dukes of Sutherland, who sent Rupert Murdoch's relatives to the colonies as poor people for stealing bread, and allowed the CIA to bring him back into Britain to dismember our print runs in the media sector, and then allowed him to be a world leader out of America on the Fox News empire and the News Corp empire that they trade in Britain. Okay, I'll just scan a little bit further down the list. So we've got Pol Pot's a celebrity who's probably been picked as the winner of that celebrity contest just because his name's Pol Potts, like the director on Murdoch's companies. Then you find between 2010 and 2011, when they got heat from investigative journalists like you and me, and they even got heat from the British press, you find Miss Rebekah, with a K and an H on the end, Mary Brooks, Rebekah Brooks. She's only got 24 of the 25 companies registered with this company, you know, on this list. And then you find just a couple of entries below, Sir David English. What was the man that Rowan Atkinson was talking about? The spy that he pretends to be in his films?
Johnny English.
Johnny English. Can you see why they chose the name Johnny English and why they chose the name Pol Potts?
Well, they always, it's just hiding in plain sight.
Just a simple obfuscation tool.
Yep.
So Sir David English was a director at this company between 1997 and 1998. And, you know, then you see links to Browns, and they've had a diminishing number of employees since 2008 when they had 1,524, and now the number of employees in 2012 was down to 1,220. And you know, what I was going to show you is the links to Reuters, but I can't find that now.
It all links back to Reuters.
Well, no, there's an
Rothschilds, isn't it?
there's an explicit holding for, I thought it was for Helen Alexander, but I'm going to have to make an entry in the text that accompanies the video to show how they're linked into Reuters. It was completely unambiguous. Goodbye, Mr. Bean, Mr. Bean. Could have been. So what I did before was to open up Murdoch's listings, and I'll do that again now. So I'm going to click on Murdoch's name and try and find the list, because it's very unusual to find Rupert, because he's in America. It's very unusual to find him on the British Business Directory now, and it's taken a long time to open, but here we go. No. Oh, it's not. Oh yeah, it is going to open. Okay, so I'm into now. James Rupert Murdoch is registered as a director under number 909805419. His registered address, and it sounds really glamorous, 21st Century Fox Inc. HQ 1211. Is that Freemasonic or is that Freemasonic? Avenue of New York 10036, United States. Okay, let me read the list of companies that he's got. I mean, it will take me ages to do it, but do you want me to do that? NDS Group Limited, Sky Holdings Limited, B Sky B Finance UK PLC, registered in the States in New York. B Sky B Guarantee Investments Limited, and I believe the B on the front of that stands for, what does it stand for, John?
Oh.
British. B, Sky B.
Yeah, sure.
Sky Network Services, Sky Digital Supplies Limited, B Sky B Telecommunications Limited, Picnic Limited, Sky New Media Ventures Limited, B Sky B LLU Assets Limited, Sky Ventures Limited, B Sky B Comedy Limited, B Sky B Publications Limited, B Sky B History Limited. A little bit of a change, quite close to you maybe. The Surrey Golf Company Limited, News Optimus Limited, B Sky B Finance Limited, British Sky Broadcasting Limited, Kids Prog Limited, Sky Subscriber Services Limited, Sky In-Home Service Limited, Amstrad Limited, Sky Television Limited, SATV Publishing Limited. Then wait for this one, it's in mass sector. GlaxoSmithKline PLC. You remember I talked about my old boss at Wellcome?
Yeah.
That's who took us over. He's now on the Forbes rich list. Rupert Murdoch's on the board. I didn't know that till today. British Sky Broadcasting Group PLC, Newsprinters Group Limited, News Group Newspapers Limited, News Corp Investments UK and Ireland, News Corp Holdings UK and Ireland, Newsprinters Assets Limited, Times Newspapers Limited, News Corp UK and Ireland Limited, Times Newspapers Holdings Limited, the Cricketer Publishing Group, the Cricketer Publishing Limited, PA Group Limited. Now I could have sworn that earlier this evening I had the link to Reuters, but I cannot find it now, and it may have been through Rebekah, but I think that it is. I will find it by tomorrow morning and we can add it to the text in these videos. But
Yeah.
you understand the you know that the Rothschilds own. Oh, maybe it's on his directors. Let's have a look. So that's his list of companies. But let's see who the directors are. My computer's very slow. Yeah, it's going to take an age. Do you want to stop there? I mean, so basically I would just like to say a little bit more. So the woman that's involved in running the British University at Southampton, she's got all of those non-executive directorships. She's got links into Murdoch's empire. She's got links into Girls' School and the governance of that. Relatively innocent, but I want you to know that every academic, now they're beginning to sack academics in places like Dundee, top 200 universities in the world, and what happens to those guys is that they've got research professors that have done decades of service with the same university, and they're being thrown out onto the streets, made redundant, but with no redundancy pay or remuneration in any form. 110 of them at Dundee just about a month ago. And so the purges are on the people that are involved in the institutions that deliver the quality service that make these people legends globally for the institutional profile. But little do they know that every one of the VCs in that network of about 20 leading universities across the UK are earning all of these non-executive directors' incomes. Miss Manningham Buller at Imperial, she was a director for a long time at Marks and Spencer's. You know her role in the Intel sector. But what is happening now to the academics in those universities is that they get virtually no research funds by entitlement. They have to scratch and scrape and, like us, make videos or write grant applications in the late night period on a Sunday evening. Yeah, and they're working like slaves. Now when they publish their objective research data like we're doing here in this amateur video, they have to pay page charges to the editorial and publishing industry. And we've just explained that most of that, almost all of it, is owned by Rupert Murdoch, but with joint ownership in the form of Dame Helen Alexander. Yeah, and we are not, unless we pay we cannot know what she earns from Rolls Royce, from British Telecom, and from all that long list of publishing firms that she was involved in running. But when the academics now release a very well researched paper in the science sector, for example, we talked about the oil and gas scams the other day. If you were to republish that thing that the Russians discovered in the 1950s about the renewable oil, you would have to shell out £3,000 for every little PDF that you publish, and the profits are going to the Vice-Chancellor. But she does not really declare that. Well, I'm going to close by playing the music that they played when they inaugurated Helen Alexander. Okay, so it's a bit pompous, but can we stop recording the video when you've heard enough of the introduction to her inauguration?
I'm going to do this then, because it doesn't come through.
You're going to stop now? Okay, I'll make the rest of the video, and it's just like a fanfare that Henry VIII would have gotten, you know, when he arrived at somebody's, you know, palace or his own residence. It's literally trumpets. Everybody's dressed in gowns, and everybody looks really civilized and innocent. But when they hear the contents of this video, then they're going to ask a few questions of Dame Helen. And I know that she's involved in NHS quangos, but I cannot find them on the directory. I've heard about that on Radio 4, and they're not a very reliable source, as you now know. But when you hear it, it tends to be the truth. So I will track her down in our NHS profiteering at a later stage. Everything else I've got in hard copy, and we've got the files and the documents and the archives. Okay, so just see if you can hear any of this. And here we go. So the title for the YouTube video is Installation of the Chancellor Dame Helen Alexander, DBE, University of Southampton. And you can sign off there, John.
Yeah, see you soon.
Okay.
Relatively rare occasion for the university community. Only our 7th Chancellor in our 60-year history. Our researchers are helping to provide energy security for the future. Our scientists are discovering new species of marine life in uncharted waters. Fascination for the countryside and its different landscapes which we've had since childhood. In 1984 she moved from London to Fontainebleau near Paris to study for an MBA at INTEL, one of Europe's top business schools. After her MBA, Helen returned to The Economist, where she would stay for the next 23 years, including the last 11 as chief executive. In her time as CEO, Helen expanded and internationalised The Economist from its flagship magazine to a broader empire.
And all of the Ponzi shells.
In almost doubling the circulation of The Economist magazine to 1.4 million, along with setting up offices across America and Asia. In 2003, she became a trustee of the Tate Gallery, not, she says...
So, a billionaire, and I don't know whether or not she's allowed to declare her income, but knowing what we know about Rebekah Brooks and Rupert Murdoch, I doubt that very much tax is paid. And when you see what is happening to those academics, how hard they work to bring in the money that they bring in, if she were to share some of her non-executive tax-free income with the researchers, then everybody could have a life. But the students get no compassion from their leaders. The leaders love to be loved, and when they grow up, those same students are not allowed to smack their children. That's abuse. We'll sign off there, and I want you to appreciate the magnitude of the cynicism from the BBC and its comedians about the sacrifice of the war dead and their ownership or aspirations to have a Rolls Royce. They might get a little discount from Helen Alexander, and there's no mention in the inauguration speech about her interests at Rolls Royce in the munitions sector and the munitions profiteering that Gordon Bowden and Professor George Lees talk about on a daily basis. Bye bye.